Module 1, Lesson 2, Process of Communication. Communication occurs when the message is imparted and received. At the minimum, two persons are involved in the process, the one who delivers the message and the one who receives and understands the message. Based on the models previously presented as well as other models, communication can be seen as a complex process having several elements. There are 8 elements of communication, and each of these 8 components or elements serves an integral function in the overall process of communication. The first element, source. The source imagines, creates, and sends the message. In a public speaking situation, the source is the person giving the speech. He or she conveys the message by sharing new information with the audience. The speaker also conveys a message through his or her tone of voice, body language, and choice of clothing. The speaker begins by first determining the message, what to say, and how to say it. The second step involves encoding the message by choosing just the right order or the perfect words to convey the intended meaning. The third step is to present or send the information to the receiver or audience. Finally, by watching for the audience reaction, the source perceives how well they receive the message and responds with clarification or supporting information. The second element, message. The message is the stimulus or meaning produced by the source for the receiver or audience. It is what needs to be delivered or imparted to somebody else. This is central to the process because the point of communicating is to say something. The message to be sent is based on why the speaker wants to say it, what the speaker wants to say, and how the speaker wants to say it. It is important to note that there is always a message in communication, even in informal communication. When you plan to give a speech or write a report, your message may seem to be the only words you choose that will convey your meaning, but that is just the beginning. The words are brought together with grammar and organization. You may choose to save your most important point for last. The message also consists of the way you say it. In a speech, with your tone of voice, your body language, and your appearance, and in a report, with your writing style, punctuation, and the headings and formatting you choose. In addition, part of the message may be the environment or context you present it in, and the noise that might make your message hard to hear or see. The third element, channel. The channel is the way in which a message or messages travel between source and receiver. Channels are the means by which the message is sent and received. There are only 5 channels: ears, eyes, skin, mouth, and nose. In other words, a message is sent and received via the senses. Of course, messages are first received through the ears by hearing, while gestures and facial expressions are received by the eyes through seeing. The skin, mouth, and nose are not the main pathways for sending a message, but they are still crucial in the imparting and receiving of messages. Imagine trying to comfort relatives whose house had just burned down. Not knowing what to say, an arm around their shoulders or an embrace will say the message. If one is deeply moved, sometimes one cannot help but to cry with them. This is a message that does not use any words. Another example is when someone sticks his or her tongue out after having eaten something. This tells the people around that what the person has just eaten is sour, bitter, or hot. Then there is the smell of food emanating from a restaurant that one passes by that is meant to tempt potential diners to come in and eat. Similarly, when you speak or write, you are using a channel to convey your message. Spoken channels include face-to-face conversations, speeches, telephone conversations, and voicemail messages, radio public address systems, and voice-over internet protocol. Written channels include letters, memorandums, purchase orders, invoices, newspaper and magazine articles, blogs, email, text messages, tweets, and so forth. The fourth element, receiver. The receiver receives the message from the source, analyzing and interpreting the message in ways both intended and unintended by the source. It is said that even if the speaker is great and the message is beautiful, if there is no listener or the listener is not paying attention, then communication fails. It is the listener who makes sense of what is said and reacts to it by clapping, nodding the head, replying, asking a return question, following the speaker's words, falling asleep, or walking away. Communication is an interactive process, and if the speaker is one half of the communication, then the listener is the other half. Imagine how it must feel when someone wants to tell his or her best friend about something nice that happened today, only to find out that his or her best friend was absent. Even more disappointing is if his or her best friend was present, but for some reason did not want to listen to what he or she wanted to say. The fifth element, feedback. When you respond to the source, intentionally or unintentionally, you are giving feedback. Feedback is composed of messages the receiver sends back to the source, verbal or nonverbal. All these feedback signals allow the source to see how well, how accurately the message was received. Feedback also provides an opportunity for the receiver or audience to ask for clarification, to agree or disagree, or to indicate that the source could make the message more interesting. As the amount of feedback increases, the accuracy of communication also increases. Feedback is also defined as the result of the speaker's monitoring of the listener's response. The speaker needs to watch out for the audience response to know if the message was effectively imparted or not. Making sure of what the feedback is will help the speaker in continuing with the communication or with the crafting of the next message. The sixth element, environment. The environment is the physical and psychological location where you send and receive messages. The environment can include the tables, chairs, lighting, and sound equipment that are in the room. The room itself is an example of the environment. The environment can also include factors like formal dress that may indicate whether a discussion is open and caring or more professional and formal. People may be more likely to have an intimate conversation when they are physically close to each other and less likely when they can only see each other from across the room. As a speaker, your environment will impact and play a role in your speech. It's always a good idea to go check out where you'll be speaking before the day of the actual presentation. The seventh element, context. The context of the communication interaction involves the setting, scene, and expectations of the individuals involved. A professional communication context may involve business suits that directly or indirectly influence expectations of language and behavior among the participants. Context is all about what people expect from each other, and we often create those expectations out of environmental cues. Traditional gatherings like weddings are often formal events. There is a time for quiet social greetings, a time for silence as the bride walks down the aisle, or the father may have the first dance with his daughter as she is transformed from a girl to womanhood in the eyes of her community. In either celebration, there may come a time for lively celebration and dancing. You may be called upon to give a toast, and the wedding context will influence your presentation, timing, and effectiveness. The eighth and last element, interference. Interference, also called noise, can come from any source. Interference is anything that blocks or changes the source intended meaning of the message. Noise is any barrier to communication, and this has three types. The first type is the physical noise, which refers to the actual noise such as loud music or the irritating engine of a motorcycle. Even a seatmate who talks to you while the teacher is explaining the lesson is noise because it prevents you from listening to the teacher. The second type of noise is physiological, which happens when the body becomes a hindrance to good communication. For example, because of a headache or a toothache, one may not be able to effectively listen to a friend, listen to music, or do anything for that matter. The third type is psychological noise that occurs when one is thinking deeply about something or is suffering from an emotional condition, which discourages participation in a communicative situation. Noise interferes with normal encoding and decoding of the message carried by the channel between source and receiver. Not all noise is bad, but noise interferes with the communication process. For example, your cell phone ringtone may be a welcome noise to you, but it may interrupt the communication process in class and bother your classmates. That will be all for Module 1, Lesson 2. Thank you very much.